She was kidnapped and held for 10 years in complete isolation. All this time she was perceived and raised not as a human being, but as a voiceless creature, deprived of the right to speak and be heard. Almost no one knew what was happening to her behind the closed doors of a small rural house. But when the door opened after 10 long years, the truth shocked even the most experienced investigators. Spring 2008. A small settlement in the south of the Spanish province of Seville. Ana, a 7-year-old resident of this village, goes out into the yard of her house in the second half of the day. The day is sunny, quiet. She was playing near the gate just a few meters from the threshold of her own house. Just a few minutes later, her mother comes out to call her back into the house. Ana has disappeared. The house from which Ana disappeared was a typical private property on the outskirts of the village. A high, neat fence, the gate always closed but without a lock. In this place, hardly anyone thought about danger. No traces of struggle or disorder were found on the property or around it. No cameras in the area recorded her departure or the appearance of anyone foreign. The area was considered quiet. Cars passed rarely. Strangers here were a great rarity. As if Ana had evaporated, disappearing without a trace into thin air. The first version investigators considered was an accident. Ravines, abandoned wells, empty houses. All of this was checked as thoroughly as possible. Volunteers and police surveyed the surroundings more than once, but they found nothing. Next, they began checking local residents, neighbors, relatives, family acquaintances. The investigation questioned everyone. Someone even agreed to take a polygraph test. No one aroused serious suspicion from the police. There were not even hints of conflict, threats, or ill will. The following days turned into weeks, and then months. The investigation ran out of versions. Ana officially became missing. The case quickly quieted down, turning from an active investigation into a stack of papers on the investigator's desk. Exactly 72 hours had passed since Ana's disappearance. Not one of the hypotheses was confirmed. Search groups combed through every corner around the village and beyond, but did not discover even the tiniest proof of what happened. The situation seemed impossible. A person cannot disappear without a trace, especially in such a quiet area. But Ana disappeared exactly like that. The parents, desperate to find even the slightest clue, turned to the press. The story received public resonance, but over time, interest began to fade, and public attention switched to other incidents. Ana was forgotten. For many, she became just statistics of missing people. The investigation was officially suspended. Formally, the case remained open, but in reality, no one was seriously dealing with it anymore. Ana's surname got into the list of missing persons. Time continued to move forward. A year passed. No one made contact. No one left anonymous tips or notes. Not a single witness gave testimony. It seemed the story had finally reached a dead end. Another year passed, and then another. Gradually, they stopped talking and remembering. Only the parents remained, who did not stop searching but no longer hoped to find answers. They continued to hang posters, appeal to journalists, write letters to various authorities, receiving no responses. And so it continued, year after year. Neighbors got used to seeing the empty gaze of Ana's mother, who continued to wait for news that never came. The case turned into one of those mysteries for which no one expects to get an answer. But after 10 years, an unexpected resolution occurred. It was then that it became clear. Ana never left this village. All this time she was nearby, hidden from people's eyes. The discovery of Ana after a decade revealed not only the fate of the missing person, but also the truly terrible truth about how she lived all this time. But what exactly happened during these 10 years and who was behind the disappearance would become clear only much later. For now, Ana's story was far from over. From the moment of Anna's disappearance, investigators could not shake one strange fact. It was an ordinary, clear day, a quiet time of day when the entire village should have been in sight of each other. And yet, none of the neighbors saw Anna leave her yard. How could it happen that on this day no one simply noticed a small person? Anna was known in the village for her withdrawn nature. She always played alone, rarely went beyond the property boundaries, and almost never invited others to her place. Her parents considered this ordinary character. She did not like noisy companies, preferred quiet games. Maybe that is why on that day, no one noticed her absence immediately. In the village, houses stood at considerable distances from each other. The nearest neighboring property was located about 100 meters away, the next one even further. The territory was open, but with dense vegetation and trees blocking the view. Even with the desire to see what was happening in neighboring yards, it was difficult. The closest neighbors were an elderly couple living in the house opposite across the road. They had lived here for more than 40 years, knew every resident of the village, but rarely went outside. It was precisely this couple that claimed they had not seen Anna that day. They even told the investigation that they did not remember when they last noticed the girl on the street. Other neighbors questioned by police also stated that they noticed nothing unusual. Most of them explained this by the fact that it was always quiet in the village. No one was used to paying attention to what was happening beyond their own yard. Thus, in the first crucial minutes, no one could say where Anna went and in which direction she might have been taken or led away. The area where Anna lived was completely open. There were no narrow passageways, hidden alleys, or parking areas where one could park unnoticed. All roads were clearly visible, but there was one nuance. The properties were large, overgrown with dense trees, and because of this, the view was partially blocked in places. There were no surveillance cameras in this part of the village. Local authorities had never installed them, believing that they were not needed in a quiet place. Residents of the village also did not remember any outside cars. No one noticed unfamiliar vehicles either before or after the incident. However, the investigation considered the version that Anna could have been taken away by car. The disappearance time was only a few minutes. In this short time, it was realistic to drive up in a car, open the door, take Anna, and quickly leave the territory. For this, it was not even necessary to completely enter the street. The car could be left on the nearest road, a little further behind the trees. Such a scenario seemed quite probable to investigators. Specialists studied maps of the area again and again, and interviewed local residents trying to find at least some details missed earlier. Experts came to the conclusion that the person who took Anna could perfectly know the area. The stealth and speed with which the disappearance occurred could only indicate that the kidnapper was well oriented in the layout of houses, knew the routes of neighbors' movements, could calculate all details in advance so that no one would notice him. The elderly couple living opposite repeatedly said that they saw nothing unusual. Nevertheless, investigators conducted several conversations with them. It was necessary to understand why they remembered nothing. It turned out that their house was located slightly aside from the road. The windows faced not the street, but in the opposite direction. That day, they were engaged in their usual activities inside the house and could not notice even the smallest details that could have become the key to solving the mystery. Other neighbors, although they could see the road, simply did not pay attention. Anna never attracted the gazes of the village residents. Her calm character and inconspicuous behavior were ideal conditions for no one to notice the moment of her disappearance. The investigation found nothing strange in the neighbors' behavior. No one was hiding information. No one was afraid to talk about the incident. On the contrary, the residents willingly cooperated, offering any details they could remember, but there were too few of them. In fact, every conversation with the neighbors confirmed only one thing. No one paid attention precisely when it was most needed. After long and fruitless questioning of the neighbors, the investigators came to an important conclusion. Anna's disappearance was not accidental. They ruled out the option that she could have left on her own or gotten lost. Only one realistic version was recognized. She was purposefully taken. However, this version could not be confirmed by either witnesses or physical evidence. No tire tracks from an unknown car were found on any road. None of the local residents saw an unfamiliar person getting into a car or taking someone away. The version remained probable, but unprovable. After some time, the police finally formulated an official conclusion. The disappearance occurred with the participation of a third party. But this was only an assumption, not supported by concrete evidence. The case again began to reach a dead end, because without witnesses and evidence it was impossible to move further. It remained only to wait for at least some new information to appear that could shed light on the fate of the missing person. And while the neighbors returned to their usual life, gradually forgetting about what had happened, the truth was much closer than anyone could imagine. Only to find it would require much more time. The year 2018. 10 years had already passed since the day Anna disappeared. During this time, the case had seemingly irretrievably gone into the police archives. But one evening, an emergency call comes in. A woman with an anxious voice asks for urgent help, claiming that her adult son suddenly became uncontrollable and aggressive. The woman's voice trembles with fear. She says she fears for her life. It would seem like an ordinary domestic conflict, if not for one important circumstance. The house where the police are going is located only 20 kilometers from the village where Anna disappeared 10 years ago. The house toward which the police unit is heading is located on the outskirts, beyond the settlement. An old, half-destroyed building surrounded by thick bushes is practically invisible from the road. An elderly woman and her adult son live here. The man recently turned 30. He does not work anywhere, has never previously come to police attention. He has no criminal past. According to official data, he is not registered anywhere, never attracted attention even for minor violations. Neighbors, whom the police question after the call, characterize the man briefly. Strange. They know practically nothing about him because he almost never leaves the house and rarely communicates with people. When he was seen on the street, the man always looked withdrawn, avoided conversations, and did not look into eyes. The locals preferred to bypass him, not to make contact. At the same time, the mother had never previously complained about her son to the police, although neighbors heard rare quarrels inside the house. But these conflicts did not go beyond ordinary domestic disputes. No one had contacted the police until this day, and patrols had never come to this address. The police officers who arrived at the scene of the call discover a frightened woman with obvious signs of injuries. She reports that the conflict began after she tried to go up to the second floor of their house. The man had long been forbidding his mother access there, but on this day she decided to show persistence. When the woman tried to go upstairs, her son unexpectedly lost his temper, began shouting, and then hit her. She managed to break free and call the police. These words immediately alert law enforcement. What is so special about the second floor if even the mother is forbidden to go there? The police quickly detain the man. He does not resist, looks depressed and alarmed, but refuses to answer questions and explain his behavior. At this time, one of the patrol officers decides to inspect the house and check the second floor. But going upstairs, the police do not notice anything unusual. An ordinary old house. Dirt, disorder, darkness. At some point upstairs, a strange sound is heard. At first, the police officers think it is just an animal, perhaps a cat or rat. But the sound repeats, and it becomes clear. There is something up there. The police carefully inspect the second floor, listening attentively. The sounds come from the area under the very roof, where the attic is located. But it is not immediately possible to get up there. Access to the attic turns out to be firmly closed and even partially boarded up with wooden planks. It seems like this was done intentionally so that no outsider could easily get inside. The strangeness of the situation forces the police to act more decisively. An additional unit arrives at the house. Officers carefully begin opening the closed part of the attic. This takes a lot of time, and the closer the police get to their goal, the more distinct the sounds become. This is no longer an animal. The police understand that there is definitely someone alive up there. The police call a special brigade, preparing for any turn of events. The man, previously detained and placed in the police car, becomes increasingly nervous, although he still does not utter a word. He simply remains silent, watching what is happening through the car window. After 2 hours, the police completely open the boarded-up area of the attic. The room is small, dark, dirty, with almost no access to air and light. When the officers direct a flashlight there, they can hardly believe what they see. At this moment, the investigation moves to a completely new stage. What the police find upstairs shocks even experienced officers accustomed to the most unusual and difficult situations. An ordinary call due to a domestic quarrel turns into an event of national scale. The police urgently contact the Central Department. Criminalists, representatives of the prosecutor's office, and journalists, attracted by the sudden commotion, arrive at the scene. The house, which once seemed simply strange and abandoned, becomes the center of attention of the entire province. What was discovered in the attic is directly related to the disappearance that occurred 10 years ago. Only then do the investigators begin to understand why not a single clue was found in so many years and why no one saw Anna leave her house. While the police were busy searching throughout the entire region, all this time the key to the mystery was located 20 kilometers from them, in a quiet, abandoned house, in an attic where almost no one went, not even its mistress. The truth turned out to be much closer than anyone could suppose, but uncovering it would take quite a bit more time. When the police finally broke open the attic, they discovered not what they expected. Inside, in the half-darkness, among trash and disorder, was a young girl. She looked extremely emaciated and frightened. The police immediately noticed that she did not say a word, avoided eye contact, and reacted to people with enormous fear. No documents or belongings indicating her identity were found. Who she was, where she came from, and how much time she had spent in this place, these questions arose instantly. Experts immediately noted her age, approximately 16 to 18 years old. In the small room where the girl was located, terrible conditions prevailed. Complete unsanitary conditions. Dirty floor, peeling walls. Air barely penetrated here. The only small window was tightly boarded up, completely blocking daylight and fresh air. There was no furniture or bed in the room, only dirty rags and an old mattress thrown on the floor. Cheap products without factory packaging were scattered everywhere. Everything looked as if food had been thrown here carelessly and irregularly. No personal hygiene items or clothing were found in the attic at all. The girl looked extremely unkempt. Her clothes were old and torn. The police immediately understood that she had been here for a very long time. This was evident both from the condition of the room and from her physical appearance. After a thorough medical examination, doctors discovered numerous old scars on her skin, indicating a long stay in harsh conditions. The medics could not immediately determine the exact origin of the marks, but it was obvious that the girl had spent more than 1 year here. Psychologists brought in for examination confirmed the obvious. Her behavior was autistic, completely withdrawn, and did not correspond to her age. She avoided any attempts to establish contact, did not respond to questions, could not speak, and communicated only with short movements and gestures. Experts concluded that the girl had spent a very long time without communication, completely deprived of social contacts. This explained her behavior and severe psychological condition. The police began checking data on missing persons over recent years. At that time, many cases of disappearances were known, but the girl's description did not match any of the recent missing persons. It became clear that she could have been here much longer than anyone could have supposed. The investigation decided to use the most reliable way to establish identity. They took a DNA sample from the girl and sent it for research. This was the only way to understand who the captive found in the attic could be. The test was sent to the central laboratory and results were expected no earlier than in several days. While these studies were being conducted, police repeatedly questioned the detained man and his mother, hoping to get at least some information. However, the detainee continued to remain silent, refusing to give explanations. His mother was in complete confusion and claimed that she knew nothing about the existence of the girl in the attic. Law enforcement officers also conducted a repeated examination of the discovery site, collecting any possible evidence, but nothing that could help with immediate identification of the girl was found. A whole week of waiting passed until the DNA analysis results were ready. During this time, the found girl remained in a medical facility under constant supervision of doctors and psychologists. Her condition gradually stabilized, but establishing contact with others was never achieved. Finally, an official response from the laboratory arrived at the police station. The DNA analysis results allowed the girl's identity to be established unambiguously. This young woman turned out to be Anna, the very Anna who had disappeared 10 years ago in a small village in the south of Seville province. All these years, she was considered irretrievably missing. But now the main thing was revealed. Anna was alive. Immediately after Anna's identification, the investigation directs all forces to studying the personality of her kidnapper. Now the police have not only a victim, but also a suspect detained in his own house. The main thing that interests investigators: how and why an ordinary at first glance person was able to commit such a thing and hold a living person in complete isolation for a whole 10 years. The answers to these questions lie in the depths of his personality, in what was hidden behind the mask of a quiet, withdrawn man. The first thing the police discover is that the suspect had never previously come to their attention. He had no problems with the law, not a single detention, not one report from neighbors, no fines, no suspicions. During all the years of living in the small house with his mother, the man had not attracted the attention of law enforcement agencies in any way. His biography lacks even the most minor offenses. But in the process of studying medical documentation, the investigation finds an important fact. In adolescence, he was diagnosed with behavioral disorder. At that time, doctors noted emotional instability, problems with controlling aggression, and pronounced signs of antisocial behavior. At the same time, he was never on permanent psychiatric record, did not undergo special treatment, and was not under constant medical supervision. The man had not worked anywhere for many years. He spent practically all his time at home, in solitude. Neighbors recall that even simple purchases were most often made by his mother. He was rarely seen on the street, and he never entered into conversations with anyone. The house and its second floor were a zone that he controlled completely. Even the man's mother did not go up there, limiting herself to living and activities on the first floor. She did not interfere and did not ask unnecessary questions, essentially allowing him to completely dominate the space of the second floor, where the attic with the hiding place was located. In the course of further investigation, investigators established key details of Anna's kidnapping. The man carried out his plan on the very day when the girl disappeared from her mother's sight. He prepared for this action in advance, coming to the village in his car, which at that time had already been removed from official registration. The car, although it was in working order, legally no longer existed, which meant it was impossible to track it by standard methods. For movement, he used exclusively country roads, bypassing major highways and avoiding populated areas. That is precisely why none of the neighbors or random witnesses remembered this car. The investigation found that the car was hidden immediately after the crime and was practically never used openly by the man again. All subsequent years, the suspect practically never left the confines of his house, minimizing contacts with the outside world and reducing them only to rare and short exits beyond the territory. Anna was all this time in the attic, in absolute isolation, inaccessible even to the kidnapper's mother. The main question that occupied the police and psychiatrists involved in the case was the suspect's motivation. He did not demand ransom and did not demonstrate behavior that could be related to sexual undertones. All the kidnapper's actions were of a completely different nature. Psychiatrists working with the case materials state, "The man demonstrated a typical behavior model called obsessive controlling in criminal psychology. The main goal for him was not causing harm or obtaining some material benefit. His true goal was complete, contactless control over another person. This condition is called the classic isolation behavior model. This type of kidnapper holds their victims not for profit, but in order to satisfy an internal, unconscious need for total control and power over someone else's life. In isolating victims, they gain complete power, since they deprive the person of all external contacts and any chance of resistance or escape. Experts also note that the suspect did not show signs of regret or remorse, but at the same time did not demonstrate obvious aggression during interrogations. His behavior remained passive and detached, as if he did not fully realize how serious his crime was. During the first interrogations, the man was taciturn. He did not avoid conversations with the police, but answered briefly and evasively. To the direct question about why he committed the kidnapping and held Anna for so many years, the man utters only one phrase: "I did not think that anyone was still looking for her." This short statement becomes key to understanding the psychological state of the kidnapper. It emphasizes his complete detachment from the norms of social life and the absence of any human attachments or awareness of others' emotions and suffering. The investigation is preparing to move to the next stage, to establish the complete picture of the crime and the man's life before and after Anna's kidnapping. But this will already be the next page in a story full not only of terrible details, but also of deep questions for which all answers have not yet been found. After Anna was found and her identity was established, a no less difficult stage began: her return to normal life. Doctors, psychologists, and social services faced a reality that they rarely encountered even in the most severe cases. Anna spent 10 years in complete captivity. Now the main task was to understand what condition she was in and how to overcome the consequences of her long isolation. The first medical examination showed that Anna's condition was extremely severe. Doctors officially stated the diagnosis: severe deprivation, that is, the complete absence of normal social contact and stimuli for development over a long period. Such cases are rare, so specialists prepared for a long and difficult recovery process. Her speech was at the level of a 5 to 6-year-old person, despite the fact that her biological age was already approaching adulthood. Anna hardly understood the questions addressed to her, could not answer coherently, limiting herself to only individual sounds or gestures. Anna's reflexes were severely weakened. The body reacted slowly, movements were constrained and uncertain. Psychologists noted that even simple everyday actions, such as taking an object in hand, opening a door, or putting on clothes, caused her serious difficulties. This meant that throughout the entire time of her isolation, she did not have to use the simplest everyday skills. Anna's social adaptation was completely absent. She could not interact even at the most primitive level with other people, did not understand social signals and elementary rules of behavior in society. Anna avoided eye contact and was almost always in an anxious or depressed state. A special team of doctors, psychologists, and rehabilitation specialists was created for Anna's recovery. Their main task was the gradual return of Anna to normal life. At the legal level, Anna was still a minor, but from a biological point of view, she was already an adult. This gap between real age and level of development became a serious challenge for specialists. Psychologists and doctors came to an unambiguous conclusion. Anna had to learn to live again, starting with the most basic things, as if she had been born a second time. She had to master the simplest skills of communication, behavior in society, and elementary self-care. The team of rehabilitation specialists worked with her daily, gradually introducing her to new conditions. Parallel to this was the legal process of restoring her identity. Anna's mother was invited for official identification, which was confirmed during the forensic DNA examination. The mother unmistakably recognized Anna despite 10 years of separation and her daughter's radically changed appearance. This became a key moment in the legal confirmation of her identity and the beginning of her return to the family, although psychologists recommended doing this as carefully and gradually as possible. Doctors and psychologists monitoring Anna's condition noted that her first successes did not appear immediately. However, daily therapy began to bear fruit. 3 months after the discovery, Anna spoke meaningful words for the first time. This became an important victory for the team of specialists because it meant the beginning of the restoration of her ability to communicate normally. Her first words were simple and short, almost like a small person just beginning to speak. But for the doctors and Anna's mother, they meant much more. This was proof that 10 years of complete isolation had not completely destroyed her ability to perceive the world and interact with it. Soon after Anna began to speak, psychologists began to introduce additional methods, classes with writing, reading, and drawing. Her speech gradually became richer and clearer, and Anna herself began to show more interest in what was happening around her. She began to become aware of herself and the space in which she was located. A few months after the first words, Anna began to write short phrases and simple words. She expressed her thoughts on paper much easier than in oral form. This was an important stage, because through written speech, psychologists managed to obtain the first meaningful evidence about what happened to her in isolation. Sometime after Anna began to write, she was able to express more complex memories. Gradually, step by step, she began to tell about individual events from her past. The first and most important memory that Anna was able to clearly describe was the day when she was taken from her home. She remembered in detail the place where she was walking before disappearing, and how a stranger put her in a car. This memory confirmed the investigation's version that the kidnapper took her quickly and unnoticed. Thus, the gradual restoration of speech and the ability to express thoughts gave the investigation the opportunity to understand even more deeply what happened on the day of her disappearance. Now that Anna was able to tell what happened, investigators and psychologists understood that rehabilitation, although it would be long and difficult, was still possible. Doctors continued to work with her daily, gradually returning her to the life from which she had been forcibly torn 10 years ago. And although there were still many difficulties ahead, her first words and memories became solid proof that return was possible. After Anna's condition began to gradually improve and her testimony became clear to the investigation, the final stage of this case began: the trial. Spanish society, having learned the details of this crime, was waiting for only one thing. How exactly would the court evaluate what happened for 10 years in the defendant's house, and what would the punishment be? The prosecutor's office charged the defendant with an official accusation on 3 main points: kidnapping, illegal deprivation of liberty, as well as cruel treatment. Each of these charges was confirmed by dozens of testimonies, conclusions of psychologists, medical and forensic examinations. The accusation looked extremely convincing and left no room for doubt about the severity of the crime committed. The defendant's lawyer, understanding the inevitability of punishment, made the only possible attempt to mitigate the sentence. He declared to the court that his client was mentally ill and therefore should not bear full criminal responsibility for his actions. The court, considering the severity of the crime and public resonance, appointed a mandatory forensic psychiatric examination to determine whether the man was sane at the time of committing the crime. The examination lasted several weeks. Doctors and psychiatrists conducted a detailed study of the defendant's personality. All documents from his past, medical records and testimonies of those around him. They carefully checked every word, every action that could indicate signs of mental disorder. The final conclusion of the examination was clear and unambiguous. The man was completely competent. Specialists stated that his personality was characterized by pronounced antisocial behavior and emotional coldness. However, he perfectly understood what he was doing and was aware of the consequences of his actions. This meant that the accused had to appear before the court as fully understanding responsibility for the crime committed 10 years ago and continuing all this time. The trial became the center of attention not only in the region but throughout all of Spain. People who learned about what was happening to Ana demanded the strictest punishment from the authorities. The press constantly published materials with details of the case, which intensified society's negative attitude toward the accused. The crime caused large-scale public debates about justice and the degree of severity of punishments in the country. Many citizens spoke out in favor of life imprisonment, believing that this was the only fair punishment for a crime of this kind and duration. However, in Spain, life imprisonment is not applied in judicial practice. Therefore, the prosecutor's office requested the maximum possible term provided by Spanish legislation, taking into account the severity and duration of the crime. After considering all the case materials, Ana's testimony, expert conclusions, and defense arguments, the court made its decision. The defendant was found guilty on all counts of the indictment. In his concluding statement, the judge noted that the nature and duration of the crime, as well as the complete control that the man established over the victim for so many years, testified to his special danger to society. The court sentenced the man to the maximum term possible under law, 25 years of imprisonment. In addition, the sentence specifically noted that the convicted person was deprived of the right to parole and any other types of sentence reduction. Thus, the sentence became one of the strictest in the history of modern Spain for such a crime. The public met the sentence with approval, considering it fair and adequate to what was done. Ana's family, despite the difficult years and trials endured, expressed satisfaction with the court's decision. It was also important that the court fully confirmed the severity of the psychological consequences of the crime inflicted on the victim. However, after the announcement of the sentence, the convicted person's lawyer made a last attempt to change the court's decision by filing an appeal. In it, the defense tried again to question the mental state of their client and achieve a review of the case or mitigation of punishment. This attempt proved completely unsuccessful. The appellate court confirmed the original sentence, finally putting an end to this case. After the final decision was made, the man was transferred to a specialized maximum security prison. From this moment, his life was completely isolated from the outside world. By court decision, he had no right to correspondence, visits, or telephone calls with anyone, including his own mother. Contact with her was officially terminated to completely exclude any influence or attempt to interfere in the process of Ana's rehabilitation and her return to normal life. Thus, 10 years after the crime was committed, its initiator found himself completely cut off from society, receiving punishment that society recognized as fair. The case became a loud lesson and warning about how vulnerable human life can be and how long evil can remain unnoticed if it is carefully hidden. Now Ana, having received the opportunity to return to normal life, could gradually move forward, leaving behind the darkest period of her life. For society, this story became a heavy reminder that evil can remain unnoticed for a long time until it is discovered and stopped. When Ana began to recover and gave her first testimony, the investigation completed the collection of evidence and transferred the materials to court. One of the most high-profile trials in the region's history began. The main question was not only what the punishment would be, but also how society and the court would react to a crime that stretched over 10 long years. The court session took place with enormous public and media attention. The case received official status as a case of special importance, and dozens of journalists, lawyers, witnesses, and ordinary residents of the region demanding justice gathered in the courtroom. The prosecutor officially presented charges consisting of 3 points: kidnapping, illegal deprivation of liberty, cruel treatment over an extended period. The defendant, who had been in pre-trial detention all this time, appeared before the court for the first time since his arrest. He looked withdrawn, indifferent to what was happening. From the first minutes of the trial, it became clear that he did not intend to show any emotions or remorse. His lawyer chose the only possible defense strategy. He declared that the defendant was mentally ill and could not fully understand his actions. The court, following established procedures, decided to appoint a comprehensive forensic psychiatric examination to determine the condition of the accused. This examination took several weeks. A team of experts carefully studied all medical documents, examined the personality of the accused, and conducted several long conversations with him. The experts' conclusion was clear and unambiguous. The accused was completely competent and capable of understanding his actions and their consequences. However, at the same time, psychiatrists noted pronounced antisocial traits of his personality, confirming his inability to integrate into society. When the results of the examination were announced in court, the public resonance only intensified. The public openly demanded the harshest possible punishment for the accused. Spain had not applied life imprisonment for many years by that time. However, people still continued to insist on the most severe sentence allowed by law. The prosecutor's office insisted on the strictest punishment, justifying this by the severity of the crimes committed, the duration of their commission, and their consequences for the life and health of the victim. The defendant's lawyer insisted on a more lenient approach, referring to the defendant's antisocial behavior and his mental state, although the medical conclusions were unambiguous. After reviewing all the case materials, hearing witness testimony, experts and psychologists, the court made its final decision. The court found the defendant guilty on all counts of the indictment. During the announcement of the verdict, the presiding judge emphasized the exceptional cruelty and cynicism of the crime committed against a completely defenseless person, as well as the accused's complete lack of remorse. In accordance with the Spanish Criminal Code, the court imposed the maximum possible punishment that could be applied: 25 years of imprisonment without the right to parole or sentence reduction. The judicial panel justified this decision by the defendant's special public danger and the need for his complete isolation from society to ensure citizen safety. The announcement of the verdict was accompanied by absolute silence in the courtroom. Many present perceived the decision with relief, considering it fair and deserved. The verdict became a harsh signal to society that crimes of this kind cannot go unpunished, despite any circumstances. The defendant listened to the verdict with complete indifference, not expressing the slightest emotion, as if what was happening did not concern him at all. Despite the clarity and severity of the court decision, the defendant's lawyer filed an appeal, hoping to soften the punishment or achieve a retrial of the case. However, the appellate instance reviewed the case materials quickly and unambiguously rejected the complaint, confirming the legality and fairness of the original verdict. After the final confirmation of the verdict, the defendant was placed in a strict regime correctional facility with complete isolation. According to the court decision, any contacts with the outside world, including correspondence, phone calls, and visits from relatives, were strictly limited. In particular, contact with his mother, with whom he had previously lived, was completely prohibited. Thus, the court and society put a clear end to this loud and resonant case, showing that even in the most complex and unprecedented situations, justice can and must triumph. But despite the final court decision, for Ana herself and her family, this was only the end of one stage and the beginning of a new, no less difficult path of recovery. After the end of the judicial process, Ana began her long path of recovery. Every day of her life was scheduled to the minute. Psychological sessions, medical examinations, specialized classes. She was learning anew to walk the streets, enter shops, be around unfamiliar people. All this was new and simultaneously a difficult trial for her, because after 10 years of complete isolation, even the simplest things had become the most complex tasks for her. Throughout the entire rehabilitation period, Ana remained outside the zone of public attention. Neither the press nor simply curious people could approach her. Psychologists and family made a strict decision. No communication with journalists, no interviews, no photographs. The only source of information about her condition and progress were official medical conclusions and rare statements from doctors. Ana's mother, who had survived 10 years of daily despair after getting her daughter back, made an important decision to leave the village forever. This was a difficult but necessary step. Every corner of familiar streets, every neighboring house reminded her of the most difficult period of her life, which she dreamed of leaving behind. Soon after the completion of the trial, she sold the house, packed her belongings, and moved to a small town where no one knew her and did not ask about what had happened. In Anna's new life, there was also no place for memories of the past. She did not visit her native village, did not return in thoughts to the events that destroyed her childhood. Anna was completely focused on trying to build her life anew, starting with the simplest things, gradually moving to more complex ones. Doctors were cautious in their prognoses, but with each month they spoke more confidently. Anna is gradually returning to life. The first successes were small, but very important. She began to take care of herself independently, master skills whose existence she had not suspected during all the years of captivity. For her, each achievement was a great victory, and specialists noted that Anna has a chance to recover to the level of an independent person. In one of the rare official statements, psychologists reported that Anna fully realizes what happened to her and gradually accepts her past life as a tragedy from which she was able to escape. And although rehabilitation will take many more years, it is already clear that this is possible if the process takes place in silence and peace. In the story of Anna's disappearance, there were actually no mysteries. There were no complex conspiracies, multi-year investigations, hidden motives, or unexpected witnesses. There was only one thing: absolute, deaf silence. That very silence that swallowed her on the day of disappearance, and in which Anna spent the next 10 years. The silence was not in a secret shelter at the other end of the country, not in an abandoned basement in an unfamiliar city. It was very close, at a distance of only a few minutes' drive from the place where everything happened. Silence lasting 10 years. This is 4 meters above ground, a dark attic of an ordinary house past which people drove without suspecting anything. During these years, searches covered the entire region, went beyond the country's borders. Dozens of volunteers combed through forests, fields, abandoned buildings, but no one even thought to look above the level of their gaze, there where no one was looking. Anna's case made society think about many things, about how attentive we are to the people around us, how seriously we perceive the strangeness of neighbors' and acquaintances' behavior, how easily we miss what is literally nearby. Society, shocked by this case, remembered Anna's story for a long time. But gradually, it too began to fade into the background, being replaced by other, new events and incidents. People again occupied themselves with their affairs, gradually forgetting Anna's name and the details of her story. Only Anna herself and her mother will never be able to forget those 10 years that divided their life into before and after. For them, the story did not end with the court verdict or moving to another city. It continued in the daily struggle to return to normal life, which Anna had once lost. Anna's story ended not with loud newspaper headlines, but quietly and unnoticeably, without journalistic sensations, without public appearances, without loud speeches on television. It was precisely this silence that became her main salvation. And now, when people drive past abandoned houses, many remember this story. Not because there were many mysteries in it, but because it reminded everyone. Sometimes the most terrible thing is closer than it seems. It is nearby, at the distance of a glance upward, there where no one looks. There, where 10 years of Anna's life passed in silence.